Standing by now in New York with more details is ABC's Lynn Scher.
John Lennon was murdered on his way home, just outside the celebrated Manhattan apartment house, the Dakota, where he lived with his wife, Yoko Ono, and a 5-year-old son. Apparently, he stepped out of the limousine and headed through the gates towards the vestibule when a man emerged and fired 7 times. According to police sources, the man had been seen at the apartment house earlier, and later in the evening when Lennon arrived, the man appeared to be rational. He called out Lennon's name, then crouched police style and fired.
The 4 cops pulled John Lennon out and put him into the back of a police car, and his mouth, he was bleeding from his mouth, and it was a terrible sight.
John Lennon's body was immediately rushed in a police car here to Roosevelt Hospital, just 13 blocks away from his apartment in Upper Manhattan. He was dead on arrival. They tried resuscitation and they tried transfusions, but nothing worked.
Were you with him on the last night of his life when he was walking on thin ice?
Yes, I was mixing it, and I walked him to the. We always had breakfast in the morning, between 9 and 10 a.m. In a neighborhood cafe. So I walked him to, and the next morning we were scheduled to master it at Sterling, and so I walked him to the elevator. I had to do another session after. I had booked my other because he didn't tell me. He told me that I wouldn't see him again until January or February, that he was going back to Bermuda after we finished Double Fantasy. And I was surprised when he called me up and he said, "I can't stop. We got to go back into the studio. I'm just having too much fun, and there's a lot of work I want to do. First thing I want to do is I want to do this thing for Yoko. She has this idea. We have kind of a half a track. We can make loops, and you and I can play on it." And so he wanted to come back into the studio. I had already, because he told me he wasn't coming back until early the following year, and he had plans for a tour. And anyway, I had already booked another artist with RCA. And so he asked me, he said, "Well, can you book them like late at night and we'll work in the day until, 8 or 9 o'clock at night?" And I said, "Of course, for you, whatever." And so normally, because we lived 4 blocks from each other, I would just, if I didn't have any work to do after a session, I would get in the car and go home with him. But after these walking on thin ice sessions, I had to grab a coffee and then go down to Studio C and do the RCA sessions, which was Karen and the Pins, a new wave record. Mm-hmm. And so that night, I walked into the elevator. I said, "I'll see you in the morning, 9 o'clock. Mix was finished. We were all thrilled. We were very happy. He had a big smile on his face. We were looking forward to a lot of things.
Yeah. But
mastering first. And then he was gone. And that was... an hour later, I was at Roosevelt Hospital waiting to find out what was going on.
He was shot late this evening in front of his apartment building in New York City. Apparently, he was killed almost immediately. The man who shot John Lennon walked up to the musician as he was leaving his limousine. According to eyewitnesses, he said, "Mr. Lennon," and then fired at him point blank at least 5 times.